the American dream. To his last breath, he'll always be a soldier.
Heard on great radio stations all across America. It's the National Defense with Randy Miller and Jerry Newberry.
The National Defense is made possible by Ford. Go further. By the Home Depot. More saving, more doing. By VSP. For more information on how VSP can help you in your corrective vision needs, visit VSP.com. By the Wounded Warrior Project, serving those who've sacrificed for over 15 years. Online at woundedwarriorproject.org. By Gillette On Demand. Get Gillette quality blades delivered directly to your door with Gillette On Demand. Learn more at GilletteOnDemand.com. By Morgan Stanley. Discover how they can help you achieve your long-term financial goals at morganstanley.com. By Farmers Insurance. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. Find an agent at farmers.com. By Gorilla Glue, makers of Gorilla Tape for the toughest jobs on planet Earth. And by Gillette Clear Gel Antiperspirant. It goes on clear and keeps you fresh all day, and it doesn't leave white marks on your shirt.
This is the National Defense. Randy Miller along with Jerry Newberry. As always, our dedication.
Hey, this show's for you, the men and women serving on active duty in the Guard and Reserves. It's for the millions of veterans out there, and it's for all their families. We're here for you. We love you. God bless you.
And the stories just keep coming.
They do.
The stories just keep coming.
And they're wonderful stories.
And they're great. We're at the American Red Cross, and we have with us Verna Caruthers, and Verna has a story. You were a donut Dolly, right?
I was a donut Dolly,
yeah.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And where were you in Vietnam?
Well, I was in 3 places. The first place I was in Pleiku.
Central Highlands.
Mm-hmm. And then Dom Batin, which is right across from Cameron Bay.
Oh, okay.
And the last place was in Black Horse, south of Saigon.
Oh, yeah. And you're probably there, let me guess, 67, 68, thereabouts?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. Right on the nose.
And more than just a pretty face.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you one story or two if you want them.
Yeah, absolutely.
About a little place that I've been called Dak To. I was stationed in Pleiku, and Dak To was a very small base out in the middle of nowhere. I finally decided that it was probably just a refueling stop because it had a metal runway, it had a very small tower, and a big container of fuel. And on the other side, it looked like something out of an old Western movie. It had a sidewalk built across the front of about 3 or 4, maybe 5 buildings at the most. It was very small, and yet we went there every week. And the sidewalk was built because of the, I don't know, the way the weather was. But
now, was that a cement sidewalk or was it pallets?
It was wood, just like out of the Western movie, wooden sidewalk across the front. Because
of the mud.
Yeah. When it was rainy season, it had a foot of mud. Yep. When it was dry season, it had 6 inches of dust. Yep. So they walked on their sidewalk. Well, when we would go in the rainy season, we would wear fireman's boots. Had handles on the side, came all the way up to our knees, and they were all a little bit big for us. But, you know, when you need a boot, you need a boot. Right. So anyhow, drag those boots out every rainy season and take off up there. And we were going into Dak To one time, and the pilot said, "We've been called away. We have to leave. There's action someplace, so we're going to just drop you off as quick as we can. You just jump out and we'll move." So what I didn't know is they hung one runner on the metal runway, and the other one was in the mud. So my friend who was on the left side, she grabbed our big old bag of props and jumped out, and I jumped out into a mud up to my knees.
Oh, wow.
And the aircraft took off, the helicopter. Well, Boz, I'll call her, said, "Come on, Verna, let's go." And I said, I can't move. I'm stuck. And she said, you can get out of there. And I said, "No, I can't." And the guys across the other side of the runway, they started saying, "Come on over, you came to see us." I said, "I can't, I'm stuck in the mud." And so one guy said, "I'll go get her." So he came running across the runway, and he jumped off the runway, and he said, "Uh-oh." He said, "She's stuck in the mud. She can't get out, and I can't either."
Oh, no.
Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
So everybody else
How many months did you stay there?
One guy, well, a bunch of people came running over, and they could reach him, so they could pull him out of the mud. I don't know what was in that mud, but it was not letting go of me.
Quicksand.
In Dacto, a horrific battle took place in Dacto with the 173rd Airborne, and a lot of Sky soldiers were killed. That was a bad place. Yeah.
Yeah.
And talk about, Jerry, how, when you guys saw Donut Dolly, I mean, it was like,
oh yeah, we were so happy.
Mm-hmm.
We knew we weren't getting any donuts, but we might get some Kool-Aid, or one time I got orange juice, but they all look like movie stars to us.
Absolutely.
I fell in love every time I saw Donut Dolly. I was in love, and they all turned me down every time.
Well, we did. I carried around sunflower seeds because some wealthy person sent 1,000 bags of sunflower seeds up there, and we get ready to go, and I'd carry some and give them to the troops. They took them, said thank you, but I don't know if they ate them or not. But anyhow,
I want to ask you about what.
You want to get me out of the mud first?
Well, yeah, you're still stuck in the mud. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Stuck in the mud. So they talked about it. What can we do? Well, we could bring some boards out here and make some ramps or something.
So you don't have any regrets about going?
No, I'm glad I did.
She's got regrets about not spending more time with Charlton Heston.
Well, yeah, of course.
Of course.
How did that impact the rest of your life?
I don't know. I can't tell you that. Just don't know. I've always been a caring person, trying to give somebody a hand, or teaching the kids so he understands.
Sure.
And it was interesting. There were other celebrities passing through. I got to see Martha Raye.
Did you?
Yeah, she did a bunch of music and songs from different things she'd been in.
She was made a Green Beret.
She what?
She was made a Green Beret.
Really?
Was she? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Neat.
Really?
Yeah.
Special Forces loved her.
Yeah, I'll bet.
My last place I was, the nurses and I all lived together, and the women who came through on tours would stay with us. And one named Tracy, who was the little mouseketeer with braids.
Oh, yeah.
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 She was coming through. She'd picked up a band in the Philippines, and she was coming through to do a bunch of shows.
Oh, that's cool.
She stayed with us a week. And when she was there, of course, we lived in one big, long building that was our barracks, plural, whatever, I don't know what it was. We all stayed there together. But when she wasn't out doing something, one of her shows, she'd work in the hospital and visit with people. Really, really a nice person. Years later, I saw a show on TV of what happened to the Mouseketeers.
Yeah.
She had come back home and become an emergency room nurse.
Really?
Wow.
I was just shocked. I was so tickled to see her and hear her say what she was doing.
Yeah, remember when entertainers used to go over and spend time? And,
well, some of them still do, but not like,
right.
like back then.
Yeah.
Well, God bless you, and thanks so much for everything you've done. You're not getting out of here without a hug. So, and welcome home.
Don't threaten Verna.
You want one more silly story?
Absolutely.
Oh, I could tell you too. This is one of my favorites.
I don't think Verna has forgotten anything.
Oh, yes, I have. The stage where my brain always says bye-bye for a few minutes. Got a new girl in. My second place I was. She was from Alabama. And this particular place had two small bases. We lived on one, and it was helicopter base, Army, and right across the other one was engineer base. They built Highway 1 up the edge of Vietnam, but one was run by a general, the other was run by a colonel. So when she came in, we lived on the colonel side of the road, so I said, take you over and meet the colonel, and tomorrow I'll take you over and you can meet the president, give me a word, guys. The general. Okay, and she said, oh, I am so excited. I've just never met a general before. And I said, well, you'll meet one tomorrow. So we met the colonel that day, and the next day we went over to meet the general, and the general's aide came out. And she said, I'm just so excited. I've just never met a real general before. And he said, and he's an ogre, too. About that time, the door opened. They said, you can come in now. And she marched right up to him and said, I am so excited. I've just never met a real general before, and you don't look like an ogre.
Nice.
That's pretty good.
I think that was one of my most embarrassed moments.
That's funny.
Well, Verna, we got to wrap it up for today,
Okay.
but thank you so much for the time.
Yes.
And
You're welcome.
thank you
Thanks
for
so
your
much
service.
for sharing with us.
We'll be right back with the National Defense right after this word from Farmers Insurance. When you're dealing with life's ups and downs, it helps to know the ins and outs of insurance. Farmers Insurance has been sharing practical insurance knowledge for more than 89 years. At Farmers, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. Find an agent at farmers.com.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.
Welcome back to the National Defense. It's Randy Miller, and it's time for another Morgan Stanley Money Brief. And back with us is Michelle Morrow. She's a member of the Morgan Stanley Veterans Network, which is such a cool thing that you guys have at Morgan Stanley. So last week, we continued our discussion of financial goals by diving pretty deep into the 3 goals that you should tackle first.
Exactly. So just to recap, some of the most common financial goals include, in no order, college planning, retirement, emergency savings, insurance, planning and budgeting, and debt repayment. And the first 3 that we talked about tackling are, number 1, creating your budget to clarify your long-term goals. Number 2, getting appropriate insurance to help protect you and your family. And number 3, building an emergency plan in case of an emergency.
Okay, so now we got our stuff started. Makes sense. What's our focus this week?
So this week we're going to talk about paying off debt.
Ooh.
And I realize paying off debt is not fun, but it is really important because as long as you have debt, you're not only paying back the money that you borrowed, you're also paying for the interest charges to your creditor. And high interest rates only increase the amount of time and money that you have to spend in order to pay back all of that debt.
That makes sense.
So, think about it like this. If you're paying $500 a month, let's say, in a minimum credit card payment, not all of that $500 is actually going towards your balance.
Right.
And what's more, when you anticipate or when you're spending that $500 every month, that's money that you're not able to put towards your other long-term plans, whether that's college, retirement, etc.
What about listeners who have multiple debts, like loans, credit cards, things like that?
Well, Randy, that's an excellent question. There are a number of strategies to follow, and what's most important is that you find one that works for you and then just stick to it. So one strategy is to pay down the debt with the highest interest rate first. So, for example, let's say you have a student loan and the interest rate is 7%, and then you have a credit card and that interest rate is 15%, so much higher than your student loan.
Yeah.
One strategy is to pay off the credit card balance first because that one's more expensive. And then once you pay off your credit card balance, whatever money you were using on that payment, snowball that in and start applying both of those payments to your student loan debt.
Ooh.
So the advantage here is that you're going to get rid of your most expensive debt first.
Student loan. Oh, boy.
I know. But, there's another strategy, which is maybe you pay down the debt with the smallest balance first. So if in this same scenario, your credit card balance was $15,000, but your student loan balance was only $10,000, pay off your student loan first. This way, the money that you're paying towards your student loan payments could then be applied to your credit card. And the benefit of this method over the other one is more psychological, is that you have this huge sense of accomplishment that comes from paying off any one particular debt. So if you start with the smallest ones first, it's going to keep the ball rolling. It'll keep you motivated. And every time you pay off a debt, that's another payment that you're going to bundle in to the next one. And so when you get to the debts that have the bigger balances, you have much more money at your disposal to really attack that debt and pay it off. And then one last thing I wanted to mention, Randy, is negotiating.
Yeah, can you do that with credit card companies?
Well, you'd really be surprised. It's not a guarantee, but especially if you have other types of accounts with a particular bank, you'd be surprised how often a credit card company is willing to help you out with your debt, whether it's lowering your interest rate, for example. And again, that helps save you a lot of money in terms of paying that back.
Yeah, and especially if you're a longtime customer.
Exactly.
Okay, Michelle, thank you. And next week we'll talk about after you pay off your debt, then what? Right here on the National Defense with the Morgan Stanley Money Brief. Welcome back to the National Defense. It's Randy Miller and Jerry Newberry. And hey, this is some fascinating stuff here that we're learning at the American Red Cross.
We're getting educated.
We are really educated, and the man to do it. Now, Dr. Jay Boyd is with us, and he is a chaplain historian.
That's correct. I'm the historian for the United States Army Chaplain Corps.
Okay, all right. So you're also a chaplain.
No, I'm not.
You're not a chaplain.
I'm an infantry officer. Sometimes I think I'm in over my head, but
how did you land this gig?
Yeah,
I mean, that's
it is a Department of Defense, a civilian historian position.
Oh, okay.
And it was a historian that when I was a captain, I was getting very frustrated. I'd had it. Somebody kept throwing me under the bus because they were an idiot, and I was done with it. And I mentioned that to a chaplain. He goes, "Oh, wait," and so I did, and they moved me from a different team. In short, it was a chaplain that kept me in the Army. So aside from the fact that I had a house in the area where the job was offered, plus that fact that a chaplain had kept me in the Army, it kind of made me want to go be their historian.
So talk about your uniform.
Okay, I am wearing the wool uniform of the United States Army in the First World War.
Wow!
And as I mentioned to you, sometimes I get asked about it, and I've mentioned that was issued to me when I first joined, and now I'm getting older where they actually think that's true, so I'm going to stop saying that.
That's right. And people go, you can still fit into that.
Yeah,
wow.
Right.
Yeah. I'm in a short sleeve shirt.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure you're warm wearing
it.
That's all wool.
Nothing says it quite like wool.
Yeah, right.
Okay, but if you're deployed to Europe and especially around this, well, really even starting in September, October, September, wool is actually what you want, and they actually made $1 million for the first $1 million. And then they actually issued their second $1 million when they were manufacturing. They started on their third $1 million for troops deployed overseas when the armistice occurred.
Huh.
So
now, have you ever been to the World War I Museum in Kansas City?
I have been to the shrine.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely the most amazing place for World War I history,
isn't it?
That you could ever imagine.
It is. Yeah.
And wow, I guess their people let me make a podcast on the history of the Chaplain's Corps.
Oh, that's cool.
I just finished an amazing book. It's called The Escape Artists.
Yeah.
Have you read it?
I have not had the pleasure.
It's about a group of World War I, for the most part, pilots who were taken prisoner, and it talked about all their different backgrounds and how these guys came up with all these plots and things to escape from these POW camps. And they later went on, some of the survivors, to teach World War II pilots, about what they should do if they get captured, what to expect, and things. I highly recommend it. It's a good book.
Oh, no, if I can get the time. I mean, you do have some of those stories aren't as good for chaplains, but you do have some amazing chaplains in the
yeah.
We need to talk about chaplains. I mean, there's in military, hey, you got a problem, go get your TS card punched. You go tell the chaplain. But, chaplains have been in it. They've lost their lives. They've faced danger. all for the higher good.
No, there were 11 chaplains that were killed in the First War. My research revealed that 8 of them were killed in action in the Meuse-Argonne offensive, the last large offensive of World War I, the 47-day operation that actually helped end World War I.
Wow.
Launched 26 September, ending 11 November. And what happened there was, first off, it still remains the largest battle with the highest amount of casualties of any battle the United States Army has ever fought.
Well, they essentially sent the soldiers. Open fields, against German machine guns. That was
barbed wire, 6 feet high and maybe 600 yards wide, interlocking fires. Artillery and machine guns are the killer of the war, and 26,000 Americans are killed, and 96,000 are wounded. And the end result is that it's an unfathomable amount. But what chaplains end up doing in the First World War and the Meuse-Argonne is they respond to the need. And so the reason 8 were killed in action was they went to try to retrieve and evacuate a lot of the soldiers that were laying wounded on the front lines from anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. One of the ones that stands out to me is Chaplain Lieutenant John Baptist DeValls. DeValls carried stretchers for such a long time that his hands gave out. He wrapped signal wire to his wrist and to the stretcher carrying handles to continue carrying. In another incident, he tried to go rescue a wounded man that was on the wire. He was found unconscious the next day, wounded. The man lying beside him. He suffered 3 chemical attacks in the course of the war. To conclude the story, he was in a hospital dying in 1920. His friends went to Congress saying the man deserves a Distinguished Service Cross, so that Congress passes that. A telephone call is made. He is informed by a nurse that he is going to get a DSC. The newspapers that I read said he bursts into tears, and he passes away 30 minutes later.
Oh, wow.
Clarence Edward, the 26th Infantry Division commander that had been with him, will actually pin the DSC on him at his funeral. So here's a man, a chaplain, that just basically gave everything he could for his flock, for his soldiers, for his people. That's the kind of things that chaplains did in the First War, and that's why, in my mind, they stand out, especially in the Meuse-Argonne battle, where they respond to a need, and they suffer, in a sense, proportionally to what goes on.
Yeah, the magnitude of death and destruction, World War I is, I've read a lot of books about it, and I've been through the museum, but it's so difficult to comprehend the scope of something.
Those numbers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a staggering number. The United States is very unprepared for this war. If you look at the regular army before April 6, when we declare war in 1917, the regular army is about 213,000. And the Germans rate that army as somewhere between Portugal and Belgium.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right? So in an 18-month period, we go from that small number to an army of almost 4 million. I don't know in American military history, even World War II, where you do such a rapid mobilization and buildup of troops. But our problem is the training. It's not very good, doctrinally or otherwise. And so we're throwing virtually untrained soldiers in some cases at German fortifications, just praying that we can because we have our heavier divisions, praying that our numbers will actually carry the day. And by and large, they do. We seldom does an American division get knocked back. We do proceed forward. Some would argue clumsily at perhaps greater cost, but we are a key component in ending the war and convincing the Germans that's not the way.
Dr. Boyd, I want to find out about, you mentioned training. So did all of the training, was it the same for the chaplains, or how was that handled?
Well, it's really interesting because the chaplains have no real overall military doctrine or schools until a chaplain, Aldrich Pruden, in February of 1918. Keep in mind, almost 2/3 of the war, have gone by almost, but recommends a chaplain school. And so
That's a good idea.
Yes, I think we all think so. Especially when you have ministers, volunteers, and every chaplain is a volunteer in the First War, just like all the wars we've actually fought in. But it's one thing to be a minister, and we believe you come fully trained in the First War, but you're not trained necessarily for survival on the battlefield.
Right.
How to put on a gas mask, for example, what a uniform is, how to salute, basic survival skills. And so in one March, we have the first ever chaplain school at Fort Monroe. And then after that school, we trained chaplains at Camp Zachary Taylor outside of Louisville, Kentucky. That's kind of interesting because initially they're just officers like anybody else, so they actually have to learn to shoot, which is kind of crazy. They, but they never use a weapon, right? Well, I can talk to you about a few that actually throw hand grenades here in a minute. But the bottom line is that they also, so they have to take horseback riding. And as a comrade historian, John Brinsfield, mentioned once in a talk he gave, if that chaplain got bucked off that horse, he probably was the Army chaplain's first airborne chaplain, for that matter. So I can't dispute a historian who came before me.
Right.
He's absolutely right on that particular moment. But indeed, in that 4 to 5 week course, chaplains begin to trickle over into Europe. We never have the full complement.
Yeah.
We end the war there with about probably 1,200. We probably are 600 to 700 chaplains short.
Wow.
They are overworked. Keeping in mind that once the war ends, that's great. Little Joe Private, he's now free to eat and sleep and get into trouble, right? But the chaplain's work is not done at the end of the war. They're still trying to keep the soldiers busy and to keep them spiritually sound and provide for them materially and all the other things. And of course, then we get hit with the influenza epidemic, which the American Red Cross assists, but chaplains are working in that hospital side by side with Red Cross and other medical personnel. And if I could recall the quote, I took care of a patient. I would towel his head. I would read him the Bible, and some of them I buried. One chaplain would report. So they were right there. And of course, some of them contract some of the same diseases.
Sure.
I ran into some memo that it was a chaplain on a troop ship with African American soldiers, and they got the influenza on the ship. And his report was it was almost the equivalent of a death ship by the time it got to port. So of all the killers to hit you after a very brutal war, this is absolutely about as sad as it can be. But chaplains were there for morale. They kept the troops entertained, and of course chaplains can go where civilians dare not go. And we like to believe, and we do believe, that a chaplain brings freedom of religion, because a civilian on the battlefield is a really stupid place. Be it they could be the Billy Graham of ministers,
sure,
but it's not a good place if you don't have the training. It needs to be a man or woman now in uniform that a troop can relate to.
It got to the point where people were going into like basic training and get like 3 weeks of training, and that was it. They'd ship them over. Is that?
It could even be worse. What could happen would be a group of soldiers would come in to, say, my beloved 81st Infantry Division, which was training then at Camp Jackson, South Carolina, and all of a sudden find a need for more soldiers on a division that's going over. So they pull them out of training, they put them in this division, and away they go. Now, they get to France, and theoretically, Pershing has set up a program to train them also in a training camp. But you take my hapless and sad 79th Infantry Division, right, which has just gotten to France, maybe had 3 to 4 months training at most, gets thrown into the center of the line, and the initial offensive of the Meuse-Argonne is supposed to take this almost impossible position called Mafahan, which stands for it's nicknamed Little Gibraltar. Interlocking fires, the whole 9 yards. These poor boys die on the wire, about 3,500 of them in 2 days.
Oh, my gosh.
The senior chaplain, Charles H. Brent, happens to know one of the major battalion commanders of the 313th Regiment of the 79th that is commanding Major Benjamin Pepper, who is killed. He's a Philadelphia lawyer. His law partner, Harry Ingersoll, a company commander, is also killed. The only time in his diary that he ever sketched anything is Bishop Brent, the senior chaplain of the AEF, will sketch a cross with Pepper's name on it, and to the side, Harry Ingersoll's name, it was personal.
Yeah.
To all chaplains that
Right.
lost their soldiers, like
Sure.
Father Francis Duffy of the 69th of New York, it was personal. So they got to know these boys. In the case of Francis Duffy, right, he'd known some of them all his life. Some of his soldiers, because they were guard, one was his altar boy. So if you read Duffy's book, he lists almost every single soldier that he lost that was a personal friend, like family, in his book. I mean, it hurts to do that. It's personal. Chaplains bring the human part,
Sure.
and Duffy will say that his last act of love is to bury his people honorably. That's to bury them well is his last act of love.
Wow.
Which says a lot for both the Chaplains Corps, but again for the support that the American Red Cross brought to this contentious time.
Dr. Boyd, do you know everything?
Yes, I do.
I mean, honestly, it just seems like you know everything.
What do you want from me?
I mean, my gosh, who could remember? I mean, just no notes, no nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, you're good.
You do realize when I leave here, I'm not going to even remember who I am. I just want you to know that
I can believe.
Okay, please believe.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Yeah,
Boyd.
it's been a pleasure.
Some great stuff.
Thanks
Great
for having
stuff.
me.
Here at the American Red Cross.
We'll be right back with the National Defense right after this word from Farmers Insurance. When you're dealing with life's ups and downs, it helps to know the ins and outs of insurance. Farmers Insurance has been sharing practical insurance knowledge for more than 89 years. At Farmers, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. Find an agent at farmers.com.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.
Hey, welcome into the National Defense. It's Randy Miller, and time now for another Eye Insights with VSP Vision Care. And the marvelous Mr. Meisel, Dr. Robert Meisel, is back with us this week to talk about, of all things, cholesterol in your eyes, right?
Yes, Randy. Cholesterol is a very important factor in good health or a lack of good health.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, I just would not put that together. But how is that important? And what steps do you take to detect it?
Well, first of all, cholesterol is a fat-like substance, waxy, found in your body, and of course, in many foods. People that eat cheeseburgers, French fries, and malted milks are probably more apt to have cholesterol that is elevated than people who eat a more balanced diet. So, too much cholesterol, if it's in your body, can build up in your arteries. Mm-hmm. And after a while, these deposits can narrow the arteries, forcing the blood pressure to go up and potentially putting you at risk of heart disease and stroke. In fact, there's more than 100 million adults who have cholesterol levels above their healthy levels.
Well, and I see that here, 20 years and older. So just because you're young doesn't mean your cholesterol is fine, right?
Exactly. And again, as fast food has flourished in the last decade or two and three, more and more younger people are having cholesterol levels that are unhealthy.
You know, that's the amazing thing, Dr. Meisel, I think that people don't understand about an eye exam. I mean, when you can detect those kinds of things, even high cholesterol, that's amazing.
Well, when you have an exam and you have high cholesterol, the majority of the time it can be detected during a vision exam. There's various signs that can happen. The most serious are deposits in the blood vessels, because those can potentially break loose and form a blockage in a blood vessel, and it can be very severe damage to the eye if it's undetected.
Yeah, and a lot of times it really doesn't bother your vision. Is that right?
Correct. There wouldn't be typically any symptoms of high cholesterol. In fact, patients are sometimes amazed when the cornea, the outer window of the eye, has a little white ring around it. And those are all little, almost like pixels of cholesterol that have accumulated over time. So again, they don't go away. That's one sign that says that the cholesterol level is probably elevated, or certainly has been in the past.
Yeah, that's amazing stuff when your eye doctor can detect high cholesterol. I mean, just another reason to get in there. Hey, Dr. Meisel, VSP Vision Care has a lot of exciting things for our particular audience. Can you talk about what you guys are doing?
We are a vision carrier participating in the Federal Dental and Vision Insurance Program, known as FedVIP. For those military families and retirees that enrolled in November, they now have access starting January 1st of this year to comprehensive vision coverage through FedVIP. If you missed the open season and are a newly eligible TRICARE member or are retiring at any point this year, you can review VSP plan options at choosevsp.com. And when you're ready to learn how to enroll, go to benefeds.com to learn about enrollment options.
Dr. Meisel, thank you once again. We'll be back here next week with a brand new segment of Eye Insights with VSP Vision Care right here on the National Defense.